The courtroom fell silent as Cassie Ventura took the stand on day 2 of Sean Diddy Combs' federal trial. What would unfold over the next few hours would become one of the most closely watched testimonies in recent entertainment history. Today we're examining how this high-profile case provides important lessons about power dynamics, the justice system, and media coverage of celebrity legal proceedings. The Combs trial represents more than just another celebrity court case. It offers a rare window into the complex interplay between entertainment, law, and societal power structures. Historically, such cases have often shaped public discourse around accountability, particularly when high-profile figures face serious allegations. From the O.J. Simpson trial of the 1990s to more recent proceedings involving Harvey Weinstein, these cases become cultural touchstones that extend far beyond their legal outcomes. Legal scholars have long noted how celebrity trials often serve as proxies for broader societal conversations about justice, influence, and accountability. The Combs trial continues this tradition, raising profound questions about how we reconcile public personas with private behaviors, and how our justice system handles cases involving significant power imbalances. Before examining the trial itself, understanding Combs' position in the entertainment industry provides essential context. For over 3 decades, Sean Combs has been a dominant force in American music and business. Rising to prominence in the early 1990s, Combs, variously known as Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, and simply Diddy, transformed from music executive to performer to diversified business mogul. His Bad Boy Entertainment label launched the careers of numerous artists and helped define the sound of 1990s hip-hop. Beyond music, Combs expanded into fashion with Sean John, entered the spirits industry with Ciroc Vodka, and ventured into media with Revolt TV. By the 2010s, Forbes consistently ranked him among the wealthiest figures in entertainment. This extensive success created not just wealth but immense cultural capital and industry influence. Former colleagues and business partners frequently described Combs as someone who could make or break careers with a single phone call. This context becomes crucial when examining allegations from those who worked within his sphere of influence. When Cassie entered the courtroom that day, observers noted her composed demeanor. Wearing a brown dress and visibly pregnant, she maintained her composure despite the high-pressure environment. Legal experts have highlighted how challenging it can be for witnesses in high-profile cases to maintain their focus under such intense scrutiny. Ventura, now approaching 40, has had her own entertainment career, beginning as a model before transitioning to music with hits like Me and You. Her professional relationship with Combs began in her early 20s when she signed to his label. This would evolve into a personal relationship that lasted approximately a decade, ending in 2018. The courtroom dynamics were particularly notable. Combs sat with his legal team, listening as Ventura began her testimony. Court reporters described the atmosphere as tense but professional, typical of federal proceedings with significant media attention. Legal observers noted that federal trials often have a more formal atmosphere than state proceedings, with stricter rules of evidence and procedure. Federal Judge Eleanor Roberts maintained tight control over the proceedings, repeatedly instructing both legal teams about proper courtroom conduct and reminding everyone present that this courtroom operates on evidence, not emotion. This approach is consistent with federal judicial practices, where judges typically exercise significant authority over their courtrooms. Ventura testified about meeting Combs when she was just 19 years old. She was an aspiring model hoping to build a music career, while he was already an established figure in the music industry with significant influence and resources. "I was young, I was naive," Ventura testified. "I didn't know better." This sentiment echoed throughout her testimony as she described the evolution of their professional relationship into a personal one. This power imbalance would become a central theme in her testimony. She described signing a 10-album deal with Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs' record label. Industry analysts note this dynamic is not uncommon in the entertainment world, where established producers often have significant control over newer artists' careers. Entertainment attorney Jonathan Rivera, who specializes in music contracts but is not connected to this case, explains, "Multi-album deals with new artists often create inherent power imbalances. The label controls release schedules, promotion, and essentially the artist's ability to earn a living. This creates leverage that extends far beyond normal employer-employee relationships." Throughout her testimony, Ventura painted a picture of increasing isolation as her professional and personal life became increasingly intertwined with Combs. She described gradually losing contact with friends who might have provided perspective on her situation, a pattern that experts on relationship dynamics identify as potentially problematic. Dr. Melissa Thornton, a psychologist specializing in relationship power dynamics, notes, "When professional and personal relationships overlap, especially with significant power differentials, it can create situations where one party's entire entire social, financial, and professional existence depends on maintaining the relationship. This creates conditions where expressing concerns or setting boundaries becomes extremely difficult. Ventura's testimony included several serious allegations, including claims of controlling behavior, emotional manipulation, and physical altercations. These allegations span approximately a decade, presenting a complex timeline of events that the prosecution argued established a pattern of behavior. Court transcripts reveal Ventura testified, "He would control what I wore, who I could speak to, my phone, my schedule, everything had to be approved." She further alleged that attempts to assert independence would result in negative professional consequences, with projects delayed or collaborative opportunities mysteriously disappearing. Psychologists who study controlling relationships have identified such behaviors as potential warning signs. Dr. Rebecca Johnson, a forensic psychologist who studies relationship control mechanisms, explains, "Control often begins in subtle ways that may even seem protective or caring. Over time, these mechanisms can escalate to more direct forms of control, especially if the controlling partner perceives a threat to their influence." The prosecution argued that these behaviors constituted a part of a larger pattern that included alleged incidents of physical confrontation. One prosecutor stated in opening arguments, "This case is fundamentally about the systematic abuse of power and influence." The defense consistently maintained that the relationship, while perhaps tumultuous, was consensual, and that any allegations of mistreatment were either exaggerated or taken out of context. Defense attorney Michael Strickland argued, "Relationship difficulties, even serious ones, do not constitute criminal behavior. The evidence will show a complicated relationship between two adults, not the criminal enterprise the prosecution alleges." What made this testimony particularly compelling was the presentation of evidence. The prosecution displayed text messages, emails, and photographs to support Ventura's claims. In high-profile cases, digital evidence has become increasingly important in corroborating witness testimony. Digital forensics expert Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who has testified in numerous federal cases but is not involved in this one, explains, "Text messages, emails, and social media have revolutionized evidence in relationship cases. Unlike witness testimony, which relies on memory, digital communications create a contemporaneous record of interactions, often revealing dynamics that might otherwise remain hidden." The prosecution methodically introduced messages allegedly sent by Combs that they argued demonstrated patterns of control, alternating between affection, apology, and threats. While the defense objected to several of these exhibits, Judge Roberts allowed most to be entered into evidence after determining they met federal standards for authentication and relevance. Court observers noted the jury's attentiveness during this portion of the testimony. Several jurors were seen taking extensive notes as the evidence was presented, a sign they were carefully considering the information before them. Legal experts watching the case have pointed out how crucial credible evidence is in cases involving allegations from years prior. Without supporting documentation, such cases often become difficult matters of one person's word against another's. Former federal prosecutor Elena Washington observes, "In cases involving long-standing relationships with conflicting narratives, contemporaneous evidence becomes crucial. What did parties say when they didn't know anyone else would see it? What concerns did they express to friends? These pieces often form the most reliable evidence in complex relationship cases." The prosecution also presented testimony from individuals who had witnessed interactions between Ventura and Combs. These included former employees, mutual friends, and industry colleagues who provided context and corroboration for aspects of Ventura's testimony. One witness, identified as a former security professional who had worked for Combs, testified about observing concerning interactions. This testimony provided external validation for some of Ventura's claims, though the defense vigorously cross-examined this witness regarding potential biases and inconsistencies. Former assistant to Combs, Marcus Wright, testified about allegedly being asked to perform tasks related to monitoring Ventura's whereabouts. "I was uncomfortable with some of the requests," Wright testified, "but felt my job depended on compliance." The defense countered by suggesting Wright had been terminated for performance issues and harbored resentment toward Combs. Jury consultant Rebecca Longman, who has worked on numerous high-profile cases but is not involved in this one, notes, "Juries often find third-party witnesses particularly compelling because they're seen as having less direct stake in the outcome. When someone says, 'I saw this happen,' or 'I was asked to do this,' it can significantly influence juror thinking." One of the most significant moments in Ventura's testimony involved a previously undisclosed incident at a hotel. She described an altercation that allegedly occurred after an industry after-party, where Combs allegedly became angry after seeing her speaking with another music executive. What made this testimony particularly impactful was that it hadn't been publicly discussed before the trial. Ventura explained she had kept these events private out of concerns for her safety and career, testifying, "I was afraid no one would believe me over someone as powerful as him." The prosecution presented photographs Ventura had taken of herself the morning after the alleged incident. These photos became a pivotal moment in the day's proceedings, with several jurors visibly reacting to what they were shown. According to court transcripts, Ventura testified that hotel security approached during the incident but backed away upon recognizing Combs. This detail raised important questions about how celebrity and influence can potentially interfere with normal protective interventions. Hospitality security expert James Morrison, who has implemented security protocols for major hotel chains but is not connected to this case, explains, "Staff training has evolved significantly regarding potential domestic incidents. Modern protocols emphasize prioritizing potential victim safety over guest status or celebrity. However, implementation can still vary significantly in practice." Combs' legal team employed several strategies during Ventura's testimony. They repeatedly objected to certain evidence being presented, arguing procedural points about admissibility and relevance. Legal experts observing the trial noted this approach is standard practice in high-profile cases. Defense attorneys must create a clear record of their objections for potential appeals later, even when they expect the judge to overrule them. The defense position, established in their opening statement, centered on three main arguments. 1. The consensual nature of the relationship. 2. Questioning the reliability of Ventura's recollections. 3. Suggesting potential financial motives behind the allegations. During cross-examination, defense attorney Sandra Rodriguez particularly focused on inconsistencies in timeline and details, a common strategy to undermine witness credibility. "You testified that this incident occurred in March, but your previous statements placed it in February. How do you explain this discrepancy?" Rodriguez asked at one point. Trial strategy expert Anthony Fredericks explains, "Cross-examination serves multiple purposes. Beyond attempting to undermine specific claims, defense attorneys often seek to establish reasonable doubt by suggesting alternative explanations for behaviors or highlighting inconsistencies, even minor ones." The defense also emphasized Ventura's continued presence in the relationship over many years, suggesting this indicated consent rather than coercion. This line of questioning drew objections from the prosecution, who argued it constituted victim blaming. Legal scholars note this illustrates the complex challenges in cases involving long-term relationships with alleged abuse. Professor Elaine Dunham of Georgetown Law explains, "Our legal system struggles with the reality that people often remain in harmful relationships for complex psychological, financial, and practical reasons. Defense attorneys naturally highlight continued contact as undermining allegations, while prosecutors must educate juries about trauma bonding and survival strategies." Throughout her testimony, Ventura maintained a consistent demeanor, though she became emotional at certain points. Jury consultants have noted that emotional authenticity can be a significant factor in how jurors assess witness credibility. Dr. Marcus Williams, who studies jury decision-making, explains, "Research shows jurors often expect some emotion when witnesses describe traumatic events, but they're also wary of performances that seem calculated. They're looking for what they perceive as authentic emotional responses that match the severity of what's being described." The jury remained focused throughout the testimony. Court reporters observed several jurors making extensive notes, particularly during discussions of physical evidence and corroborating messages from third parties. One female juror was observed wiping tears during particularly difficult testimony, while a male juror in the back row appeared visibly uncomfortable during descriptions of alleged altercations. However, jury behavior experts caution against reading too much into these reactions. Juror reactions don't necessarily predict verdicts, explains veteran jury consultant Sophia Chen. Someone may be moved by testimony, but still require more evidence to reach the legal standard of proof. Others might appear unmoved while actually finding testimony quite convincing. Outside the courtroom, media coverage of the trial became a story in itself. News organizations carefully reported on the proceedings, mindful of legal and ethical considerations in covering ongoing trials. The contrast between tabloid coverage and mainstream reporting was particularly stark. While some outlets focused primarily on sensational aspects, others attempted attempted to place the trial in broader social and legal contexts. Social media discussions about the case highlighted the challenges of covering sensitive legal matters in the digital age. Public opinion formed rapidly, with many commentators making judgments before all evidence had been presented. Media literacy experts point to this case as an example of why critical consumption of news about ongoing legal proceedings is essential. The public often receives incomplete information while trials are in progress, yet many form firm opinions based on limited perspectives. Dr. James Hartford, who studies media coverage of legal proceedings, observes, celebrity trials often become proxies for broader cultural debates. People quickly align with one side or another based on their existing beliefs about power, gender, race, or celebrity. The actual evidence presented in court sometimes becomes secondary to these larger narratives. Social media platforms saw the emergence of distinct communities supporting either Combs or Ventura, often with little crossover or dialogue between these groups. This phenomenon reflects broader trends in how public discourse has become increasingly siloed, particularly around contentious topics. The trial also featured testimony from various expert witnesses who provided context and frameworks for understanding the allegations. These included psychologists specializing in relationship dynamics, medical professionals who examined evidence of alleged injuries, and industry experts who explained the power structures within the music business. Dr. Eleanor Thompson, a trauma specialist who testified for the prosecution, explained how power imbalances can affect relationship dynamics. When one party controls another's financial future, housing, social connections, and public image, traditional understandings of consent become complicated. The freedom to say no or leave becomes severely constrained. The defense countered with their own experts, including Dr. Robert Nelson, who cautioned against applying contemporary frameworks retroactively. Relationship norms and expectations have evolved significantly over the past decade. What might be considered controlling today might have been viewed as protective or even romantic in earlier contexts. This battle of experts highlights how criminal trials increasingly involve not just factual disputes, but competing interpretive frameworks for understanding human behavior and relationships. Beyond the individuals involved, this case raised important discussions about power dynamics in the entertainment industry. Industry veterans noted that relationships between established producers and young artists have historically been prone to potential abuse. Music industry attorney Samantha Rodriguez observed, "The traditional music business model places enormous power in the hands of executives and producers. Artists, particularly new ones, often have little leverage and few protections. This structural reality has enabled problematic behavior across decades." Several music industry organizations use the trial as an opportunity to highlight their efforts to create safer environments for young artists. These initiatives include mentorship programs, clear reporting channels for inappropriate behavior, and educational resources about contracts and legal rights. Recording Artists Guild spokesperson Marcus Johnson stated, "This case, regardless of outcome, has accelerated conversations we've been having about implementing structural changes. These include independent advocacy resources for new artists, mentorship programs outside traditional power structures, and clearer ethical guidelines for industry professionals." Analysts suggest this case may lead to more substantive changes in how the industry approaches professional relationships and accountability for misconduct. Entertainment industry observer Natalie Chen notes, "We're seeing labels and management companies implementing new policies around professional boundaries, particularly involving young artists. Whether these changes prove substantive or merely cosmetic remains to be seen." The trial also prompted broader discussions about historical patterns within the entertainment industry. Cultural critics and historians place the specific allegations within longer trajectories of problematic power dynamics in music, film, and other creative industries. Music historian Dr. James Peterson observed, "The music industry has repeatedly faced reckonings around power and misconduct, from the exploitation of young artists in the 1960s to the casting couch allegations of the 1980s to the Nasser Me Too movement. Each generation believes they've solved these problems, yet structural issues persist." Industry psychologist Dr. Lisa Hammond added, "Industries built around image, youth, and subjective gatekeeping create particularly vulnerable conditions. When someone's career advancement depends on subjective judgments about their look or sound or potential, traditional workplace protections often prove insufficient." This historical context helps situate the specific allegations within broader patterns, suggesting that regardless of this particular case's case's outcome, the underlying systemic issues require continued attention. This case offers several important lessons for students of law, media studies, and ethics. 1. The complexities of the American justice system, particularly in high-profile cases where media attention and public opinion can create additional pressures on all participants. 2. The importance of evidence collection and preservation in legal proceedings, especially in cases involving allegations from years earlier. 3. How power imbalances can affect professional and personal relationships, creating conditions where traditional understandings of consent and choice become complicated. The challenges of media coverage during active legal proceedings, including the tension between public interest and the rights of involved parties. 5. The relationship between public perception and the legal process, including how cultural attitudes shape our interpretation of evidence and testimony. 6. How structural factors within industries can enable problematic behavior patterns across decades and multiple individual cases. 7. The evolution of societal understanding regarding appropriate professional boundaries and accountability for misconduct. Educators can use this case to facilitate discussions about consent, power dynamics, and the responsibility that comes with influence and authority. Professor Maria Santiago of Columbia University suggests, cases like this provide valuable teaching opportunities across disciplines. Law students can examine evidentiary standards, media studies students can analyze coverage patterns, and sociology students can consider structural power dynamics. Throughout the trial, Judge Roberts repeatedly instructed jurors about the specific legal standards they must apply. Unlike civil proceedings, which operate on a preponderance of evidence standard, criminal trials require proof beyond reasonable doubt, a significantly higher threshold. Legal analyst Rebecca Johnson explains, the American justice system intentionally places the burden of proof on the prosecution. This reflects the philosophical position that convicting an innocent person represents a greater harm than allowing a guilty person to go free. In practice, this means jurors must be convinced to a very high degree of certainty. This distinction between legal standards and public opinion becomes particularly important in high-profile cases. Social media verdicts require no specific standard of proof, while legal proceedings operate under strictly defined parameters. Professor Thomas Washington of Harvard Law School notes, the gap between public discourse about cases and actual legal proceedings has never been wider. Online, allegations often become treated as established facts immediately. In courtrooms, every element of a charge must be proven through admissible evidence and withstand procedural scrutiny. As we continue to follow this landmark case, it's important to remember that the American justice system requires all allegations be proven beyond reasonable doubt. While public opinion often forms quickly, the legal process necessarily moves more deliberately. This case highlights why understanding the distinction between allegations and proven facts is essential, not just for legal proceedings, but for responsible citizenship and media consumption. Whatever the outcome, this trial will likely have lasting implications for how we discuss power, accountability, and justice in the entertainment industry and beyond. It serves as a powerful reminder of why we must carefully consider the systems that govern our society and the protections they provide to all involved parties. The testimony of Cassie Ventura reminds us that behind the headlines and social media discussions are real people with complex experiences. It's our responsibility as informed citizens to approach such matters with both critical thinking and compassion. As this case proceeds through the justice system, it provides an opportunity to examine not just the specific allegations at hand, but our collective responsibility to create environments where power cannot be misused and where accountability applies equally regardless of wealth, fame, or influence.